So, some of the less obvious but really, really salient, important distractions. Fear. I got permission to tell this story. I like this story a lot. I work with this mom and her 15-year-old son. He's a freshman in high school. And they've got a really, really good vibe and a really good rapport. I like them both a lot. And we're kind of talking. I'm trying to get a feel for the terrain of their relationship and their family and how it works. And at one point, early on in the first session, Mom says, "Oh, and we do homework together too." And I'm thinking, that's what I love to see. I like the idea of a mom and son sitting and doing homework together. That is some good, available parenting. Right on, Mom. I love that. And she goes, "Oh, maybe you're not understanding me, Dr. Duffy. We sit down and we do all his homework together." And now I think I really don't understand. And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean all his homework?" She goes, "Well, I get out all the syllabi from all his classes every night, and I write down all the things that we need to do, and then we go through all the assignments one by one, and any tests we need to study for, we spend a period of time studying, and I usually determine that that's within a half an hour and 45 minutes, and that's how we do his homework." And she kind of smiles, and I'm kind of sick to my stomach. And I realize that's not availability. Oftentimes, when you're a therapist, we have therapists in the room, right? And I think maybe you can verify this for me, you guys. Sometimes people will say, for the last maybe 30 seconds, everybody's up, session's over, we've already scheduled the next gig, everyone's just about out the door, and that's when somebody saves the kicker, right? Yeah. Like the very last thing. So we're just about out the door, and Mom says, "Now, if he has like a soccer practice that's running late or a game, every once in a while, I'll write an English paper for him. But he has to read it before he turns it in." Yes, go Mom, that's the way, yes. So, you know, that's a kind of a funny story. But the problem with this is really obvious, right? This kid is learning very, very systematically that his mother and his father believe he is not competent, that he cannot manage his own world, that he cannot manage his own homework, complete show of no confidence. One time, he got a 94 on an English paper, and he brought it home and he said, "Look, Mom, you got an A. Good job." And I think Mom might make the honor roll for the first time in 46. And I asked Mom at one point, "Why do you do this? Why do you sit there and do the homework with me?" And she says, "Honestly, I'm afraid. I'm afraid for him. I'm afraid he's going to do really, really poorly in high school. I'm afraid he's not going to get into a good college. And to be really honest, what I'm most afraid of is he's going to make his father mad when he comes home after a long day of work. And I can't live with that. And so I do his homework with him, all of it." Now we talked about this, and we talked about competence, and I gave her the availability lecture, and we went on and on about that. And she eventually agreed, "Okay, I'll back off, and I will become an available consultant to my son. And so I will be available if he wants help with his homework, but I'm not going to micromanage it. I'm going to let him do it on his own." Okay, cool. I could live with that. She could live with that. And so now it's about a month later, right now. And this week, I asked him, "So, how's school going?" And it turns out he has the exact same grades that he had before. Exact same grades, exactly. And so he never needed her to do it in the first place. And sometimes when we make decisions out of fear, we make really poor ones and wholly unnecessary ones. So all this energy is spent trying to keep this ball in the air when the kid's perfectly capable of keeping the ball in the air on his own. And this is how like crazy and insidious fear is, right? I mean, it's like, you know, it really kind of can control us in really, really terrible ways, you know? And so I will ask you to replace fear with a leap of faith. And a leap of faith in two things. One is a leap of faith, like I was talking to Mr. Doherty over here, in your parenting thus far. So trust that in these 12 or 13 or 14 or 15 years that you've been with your child, you've done a good job. You people, I know a lot of you guys, you're good parents, and you've raised good people. And you can trust that what you've tried to get in there is probably in there. So you don't probably have to worry so much. So a leap of faith in you, that's one thing. But also a leap of faith in your kid's ability to do well. How many people growing up were not math people? How many people couldn't sing growing up? How many were in science, people? Okay, now here's something.
How many raised your hand?
How many raise your hand? How many can't do anything? All right. Here's what happens when this takes place and we act out of fear. We create this family mythology about what our kids can't do. And most of us have been victim to this. In my family, I'm going to share this with you, but I don't want to hear any jokes later on. My nickname in my family was John Bones. And the joke was I wasn't very strong. And I got to tell you, it took me forever to get out from underneath that and be the enormous man you see before you today. But you can see how damaging it is, because most of you who weren't math people, it's just something you came to learn about yourself, because if it's repeated in a family 4, 5, 6, a dozen times, eventually you come to believe, well, I guess I'm just not a math person. But barring a profound learning disability, I think most of us are perfectly capable of being math people. I have worked with kids who were not math people who turned out to be perfectly fine math people. So when we act out of fear, sometimes we create a myth in our families, wholly unnecessary, that our kids are incompetent, because they will lower themselves to your expectations. So I really encourage you to raise your expectations of your kid, like we were talking.